Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the attempts by Brexiteers to change what it is they were saying Brexit meant a few years ago as opposed to now. But first, if you find yourself enjoying the video, then please click on the like button and subscribe to the channel. So Dominic Raab this week, our new Foreign Secretary, has been saying that he warned during the Brexit referendum campaign that a vote to leave was potentially a vote to leave without any deal at all, and that he'd talked about the danger of this, so if you voted for that, that's what you voted for. He did this in response to a question to justify taking us out of the EU with no deal when there appeared to be no mandate to do so. However, what he said this week was completely untrue, so much so that it's actually untrue to say that any Brexiteer ever talked about leaving without a deal. They all said that that would be lunacy, in fact, Raab included. In fact, Raab had said that he discussed no deal every time that he was on the BBC to talk about it before the referendum. Now, when challenged, he said that, well, the BBC's memory must be a bit sketchy on this. I mean, I'm sure we've all been in arguments like this. You know, one person said a thing and then denies saying it later. I mean, it's not like there's any proof. You know, the BBC don't go around recording what people said in interviews, do they? Oh, wait, they do. Here are some of the things that Dominic Raab said before the referendum. He said, "We would not see any trade barriers go up because we're the fifth biggest economy in the world." And look at the options being put out there. Swiss, Norwegian, Turkish. We're very well placed and mutual self-interest suggests we'd get a very good deal. Now, if you want to hear what he was actually saying to the BBC, I've put a link to one of those interviews in the description below. It's also interesting because at the end of the section, he tries to say that the UK has no power to deny entry to EU citizens at the moment, except in cases of serious and present danger, but is then trapped by the interviewer into acknowledging that the UK does have the power to prevent anyone entering the country, even from the EU, whenever the Home Secretary considers it in the national interest to do so, and he used Marine Le Pen as an example there. Now, it's interesting to note that a lot of Brexiteers talked particularly about the Norwegian and Swiss arrangements with the EU as something to emulate. Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson, David Davis, Dominic Raab, Michael Gove, Stephen Baker, and so on, all said that it would be utter madness to leave the single market. They were all clear that not only was that not what they would advocate, but they gleefully pointed out that nobody was making the case to leave the single European market at all. The idea that this was even being discussed, as far as they were concerned, was laughable before June 2016. But what I'd like to know is this. Why, ever since the referendum, those same people have not been pushing for that arrangement? If the Norway arrangement is so great, and it certainly suits Norway, then why aren't we pushing for that? When Theresa May was drawing her red lines all over the negotiations, why weren't they telling her to copy and paste the Norway deal, or Swiss deal, whichever you like, scaled up for our economy? Even now, why aren't they going for that? The EU hasn't said it'd be a problem for them. They've not objected to it. Could it be because the Brexiteers never wanted any deal from the EU from the start? They just wanted the British people to sign on the dotted line whilst they covered up the fine print. Could it also be because they said that Norway has full access to the single market but makes its own rules? It doesn't, of course. It accepts EU rules with no say in them at all. That being said, Norway does have a great deal of autonomy on other matters that Brexiteers raised, including agriculture, fishing policy, trade agreements with other nations. You know, if you're still mad enough to think that a population of 60 million has as much negotiating power or more than a bloc with 500 million people. But if the Brexiteers were all talking about Norway or a Swiss-style deal, and bear in mind the Swiss one only really differs in that they're not part of EFTA, which we wouldn't be able to join anyway, then why didn't they just do that? You know, had that option been pursued, we would now have left the EU on the terms that the Brexiteers promised. Parliament wouldn't have had any major objections to those terms, at least not enough MPs. Yes, they're far worse terms than being a full member, but we wouldn't have seen inward investment into the UK all but drying up over the past year. And it has to be remembered throughout all of this, despite the narrative from Brexiteers being that the reason we're still in the EU is because of Remainers blocking our exit, the people who actually stopped us leaving are the Brexiteers. The same Brexiteers who said we'd be leaving with full access to the single market voted against the withdrawal agreement specifically because they say it ties us to the EU. Stephen Baker, one of those names I described earlier, he was one of the ones saying it'd be absolute lunacy to leave the single market. We must have those strong ties with Europe. He refused a ministerial position in Boris Johnson's government specifically because he wants to be on the backbenchers to call Boris Johnson to account if Boris Johnson tries to do anything that is not a no-deal Brexit. That's how far he's shifted his position. And it's not just the issue of what Brexit means that Brexiteers have tried to rewrite. Let's remind ourselves, just to end with a few other little gems. So Nigel Farage, before the referendum, said that if there were a margin of 52 to 48%, that should result in another referendum, as the margin would be too narrow to be decisive. Well, wouldn't you know it, that actually was the margin, only he was expecting it to be for Remain. In fact, the margin was actually slightly narrower than that. The official Vote Leave campaign, which contained, of course, a number of senior government ministers, including Boris Johnson heading it up, they said that we would negotiate the terms of a new deal before beginning any legal process to leave. Now, of course, they misunderstood the fact that you can't negotiate a new arrangement until you've signalled your intention to leave, but it doesn't stop those same people who now occupy those top spots in government from extending indefinitely until that new deal has been negotiated. Another corker was from the other large Leave campaign, Leave.eu. One of their best quotes was, "They said business would flee if we voted Leave, but instead we're seeing great British innovators like Dyson investing in the UK's future." So James Dyson says hi from Singapore, by the way. Jacob Rees-Mogg said that there should be a second referendum after negotiations have been completed. I'm assuming that as he now controls government business in the House of Commons, that he'll be putting forward such a motion on Parliament's return after the summer recess. Boris Johnson, our favourite little turncoat, said that there is no plan for no deal because we're going to get a great deal. And he said that after the referendum result. Well, he was half right. Actually, on a matter unrelated to Brexit, another favourite of mine of Boris Johnson's statements that I can't help putting here was when he said it was arrogant and contemptible to become Prime Minister without a general election. Just some of the ways in which the Brexiteers rely upon the population not remembering what it was they voted for, or on what basis, as if these things are not recorded. I hope you find the video interesting. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please click on the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.